Okay. This is our second to last class. We have one more class next week. And the next section's very interesting and quite long. But what I wanted to do tonight was to go back over a couple things. One of that I promised to do, which was to do the John Muir piece. So, I don't know, oh, you're here, okay, good. So somebody will be happy to hear John Muir. But I also wanted to spend a little more time on this section that came up with Zhi Chang. And the reason I'm doing this is, one, if you remember, I said some things last week and I saw consternation, wrinkles on people's faces. Like, what is he talking about? That can't be right. When I said meditation is not about getting awakened, it's not for getting awakened. And you can't, you shouldn't use meditation to seek awakening. And then there was wrinkles on the face. So like, wow, what am I doing with it then? What is it all about? And I was thinking that comment came out of this passage where he was thinking, I should be, remember his teacher said, not knowing, that's true knowing, and this true seeing is not seen in a single thing, not aware, the sort of not knowing, not aware, as somehow the higher meditation state. And then the Sixth Patriarch corrects him, and he says, you're not seeing a single thing, still holds on to the seen, nothing, and much like floating clouds blocking the sun. He goes through this wonderful analogy. And then Zhi Chang has, a realization that he had been doing it wrong all this time. And then there's finally this beautiful passage where the Sixth Patriarch seems to be describing a state that's neither stillness nor movement, that's not either in the world or outside the world. It's sort of a non-dual, free and liberated, coming and going without borders or boundaries, completely responsive and yet unmoved and so forth. This state that's being described is then called the human nature, essential nature, unbound, unlimited, without restrictions on it in any kind. And this is often called Bodhi, or it's called Nirvana. There's different expressions for it. And then he basically says, if you can understand this and you understand all the vehicles, all the methods of practice, whether Shravaka, Pratyeka, Bodhisattva, and so forth, are all expedient devices to get us to come back to the direct seeing and understanding of our true mind or true nature. So on that, I was going to say a little more about this tonight, because I didn't want you to go away with the idea that, meditation doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you meditate, because certainly I think, and most of the sages that come out of the living tradition say that it does matter. But it matters in a way that's different than we might think about it, and that's what I wanted to clarify tonight, because give a little theory or background to frame this. This is really important, because otherwise we'll take up a meditation or mindfulness practice, however you want to call it, and it's very easy to go wrong with it. It's very easy to ask it or want it to or seek for it to do something that in its root presentation is not meant to do. And we thus misuse it. We, instead of using meditation to see the mind, light up the mind and see the nature, we use the mind to direct meditation back into a sense of self. And we construct it into something that becomes then an attachment or a goal that we're seeking. So this is really important. So I said last week, let me go over this a little bit and then we'll go on. The way I read it, the way it was taught to me, and if you look at texts like the Shurangama Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, and certainly the Platform Sutra, the Sixth Patriarch, you'll see that all of them are saying the same thing, that whatever practice you take up, including, let's say we're talking about meditation tonight, but any practice you take up is a method of correcting or returning or rebalancing or restoring It's not going anywhere, getting you anything, or aimed at some objective accomplishment. Rather, it's simply getting anything out of the way that's obstructing the natural opening up of one's inherent wisdom. So it's not for getting awakened, it's not for getting anything. I said this last week, it's for getting at unawakening, which then I saw more wrinkles on the face. What does that mean? So it's for ungetting. Meditation is for ungetting. It's not for getting awakened, it's for ungetting or unbinding. It's for untying. And once the knots are untied, there's nothing more to do. Everything just moves and flows naturally. One way to look at it is it interrupts. Meditation is an interruption. It's an irritation. It's a bother. It's a little bit like a gadfly. You know what a gadfly? Everybody know gadfly? Anybody know here of Socrates? Socrates? Yeah, he's replacing Brad Pitt as the hottest thing out there. Socrates was a philosopher in Greece, and he simply believed, or he gave the method that I'm the wisest man in all of Athens because I know I'm not wise, whereas everybody else thinks they're wise, so they're really stupid. And his method of teaching was to go and inquire of people and ask them things. For example, he'd say, where are you going? I'm going off to war. Why are you going off to war? Because I'm a patriot. And he'd say, oh, great. Well, what's a patriot? And it's someone who loves their country. And he says, above all else? Well, certainly. But can you love the gods? Yes, I love the gods. But if the gods tell you not to kill, and your country tells, so which do you love more, the gods or your country? And then they start getting irritated. And he said, therefore, the philosopher, the teacher, is a gadfly. It's the fly that buzzes around and bothers you. You want to be, it's and you go, get out of here, get out of here. So they don't get good reviews, gadflies, and they don't get tenure. And they don't get student reviews. They're terrible for them. This teacher really upset me, made me very unhappy, gave me a bad grade, and disturbed my tranquility. And that's a good teacher. So in this sense, in the Buddhist sense, you could say that the teacher, and by extension the practice, is not to just, it's not for calming you. And it's not even for creating a kind of capital, if you will. I'm using the word capital. Coin that you can use in exchange for something else. Like I bow for 1 week or I sit for 1 week. I have then in my karmic bank account a huge repository of capital that I can use to bargain with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to get things. Okay, I sincerely bowed for 1 week. This built up a lot of what we call merit and virtue, and therefore I can use this to cash in. And then some people say, well, I'm not going to cash in. I'm going to keep letting it roll over until I die, and then I'm going to cash in and get the Pure Land. And if I'm really good, I'll get a superior grade of lotus in the Pure Land. So you're really thinking ahead. And what the Sixth Patriarch is saying, what the texts are saying, this is a misuse of Dharma. This is taking the mind that seeks and wants and craves and transferring over to spiritual objects of desire rather than material objects of desire. But if the mind that is unattached and unseeking and grasping is a Buddha mind, then everything we have to do, every practice we have, must in some way or another trigger that letting go, that mind that seeks for nothing. And in the seeking for nothing, it seems what the texts are saying, you arrive. You return to that original state when you let go and stop seeking, even at the spiritual level. So what this goes to is the deep theory, the deep ground of this theory, and that's why I want to do this, because often it's not really talked about. There's a lot of meditation being offered, a lot of mindfulness being offered, and from everything to sports, athletic, to banking, investment, to the military now is using various mindfulness techniques to make better soldiers or to reduce the stress they can feel in combat and so on and so forth. And it's all called mindfulness, but the deep root of this one is a very profound understanding that the whole purpose of meditation and all the practices is to return to the root and go back to the source of our true nature. It's not to get anything. It's not instrumental, okay? In other words, if I do this, I get that. It's not an instrument you use. Rather, it's intrinsic. Its value is intrinsic in and that. It's worthwhile in and of itself because it opens up the heart and the mind to the true nature. This is really hard to grasp because we're so conditioned or used to using everything to get something. Every relationship, everything we pick up, we see as a tool to advance our position or our holding or our capital or whatever. So there's two things that go, and this is based on the very fundamental notion that this text has and the Avatamsaka text has. And you've heard it many, many times, that everything is made from mind alone. Everything comes from consciousness alone. Everything is a product of awareness alone. And therefore, if that's the case, then not only do we make our destiny by our thoughts and our actions and our emotions, and our mind alone creates things that happen that then turn to shape and control and make our lives, cause and effect. So one of the meanings of this is that we become what we think or feel or do intentionally. And this is very much part of that. So therefore, in meditation, you don't want to seek or do or anything, to get something. What you want to do is to stop that process of wanting, seeking, thinking, and interrupt it. So meditation, it's almost like we're what's the word? There's an inertia, and we're just in motion all the time. And unless something interrupts that, we never stop to think or consider that there's another mode of being which is not seeking, not wanting, not grasping. So what meditation is meant to do is to interrupt, dwan, not to cut off, but interrupt that flow. And so this one, everything made from the mind alone, can be manifested in this text called the Dhammapada. Any of you read the Dhammapada? One hand, two hands. It's an early Buddhist text, usually listed in the Theravada Pali tradition. But the first opening lines, if anybody remember the opening lines of the Dhammapada, the twin verses? We are what we think. We become what we think. Just as the cart follows the ox, so does our lives follow our mind and consciousness. This is the opening lines of the Dhammapada. If you have wholesome, unattached, unbound, pure thoughts, then your life then follows that and manifests accordingly, and vice versa. If they're hateful, envious, fighting, and violent, and so forth, your life also reflects that, just as the cart follows the ox step of the pulling it. So this is the opening line. The second part of this is a little trickier. Everything made from the mind alone. That's where I think it gets kind of interesting. It's saying the very reality we behold what we believe or imagine. Now this is a little different. We become what we think is the first one. But the other one's saying we become or we behold what we imagine. So that our perceptions, the very perceptions we have, are conditioned. Now this is also one of the means everything's made from the mind alone. So what that means is that what we see and what we interpret as our experience of reality is in fact a subtle interaction between our sense organs, the sense objects, and the intervening consciousness that projects, fabricates, imagines, interprets, and so forth. And so that's why it's saying, whoa, there is nothing hard and fixed about that, but it's in constant interaction and flux and flow between this and that. So then this is one of the lines from this. Whatever belongs to the triple world, and the total world of reality that we move through of desire, form, and formless world, is chittamatra. Is thought alone or awareness alone. And so the idea is that our very sense organs and consciousness is limited as we get to use them. And this is hard for us to accept because we think we're really aware and on top of things. But the text is actually saying, even from just a physiological point of view, we'd have to say that, right? We know that our eyes can only see a certain spectrum of light. Outside of that, we don't see it. And of course, that means it doesn't exist. And then our ears only hear within a certain range of ultra and sub or whatever sound. And outside of that, we don't hear. Really. I mean, there's all kinds of sounds in the universe going on right now, and we're just sitting here like, and we don't hear it. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And there's things that go on we don't see. And then there's things we don't smell. Dogs are better, much, much better. And deer are much, much better than dogs. There's a whole bunch of living beings that smell much better than we do, and that actually detect with their smell. And we have these noses and these holes, but they're very blunt instruments, especially this time of the year when they're all clogged up. They don't work very well. And so we can't really sense the sort of things of danger and whatnot that other animals are very keen about. That's why they use them in airports to detect bombs. You don't see them walking around with people saying, smell the luggage. It's useless. They don't do anything. But a dog can detect this. Okay, so eyes, ears, nose, tongue, our range of flavors is also very limited. And our kinesthetics also is really underdeveloped and sometimes actually harmed. If we have trauma that happens to us, our sense of feeling is greatly reduced and so forth. And so that's physiologically, but psychologically what it's saying is in our consciousness, in our active awareness, because of the way we want, grasp, fear, and our emotions, the actual awareness we have is a limited field of perception. And in many ways, a distorted field of perception. Now, there's many experiments you can point to that psychological, I'm not going to go into tonight, that people have established this. This is not just Buddhist lore. This is a known fact. We pretend that it doesn't exist. We ignore the physiology, the psychology, and the spirituality of consciousness only, and pretend that we are, totally in charge, rights-bearing, determined, will-generated, wise, intelligent people making choices and whatnot. For the most part, we're, to excuse the expression, we're led around by our nose, and not a very sharp nose at that. And so when you understand that this was what the Buddha was talking about, then you go, okay, so here we have this framing. And what the saying is, the Buddha is saying, there is nothing that is fixed. If you look around you, all phenomena are constantly changing, moving, and in flux. There's nothing settled or fixed. We know this, right? Everybody knows this? Okay. Yeah, we know it, but we pretend we don't know. But that's okay. That's part of the uninterrupted part. Uninterrupted, we know that in the back of our heads, but for the 99% of how we live our lives, we pretend that that's not the case. We live in this masquerade. But it's not just an outer masquerade of pretending to be something to somebody else. It's an inner masquerade. We fool ourselves. And so I do this all the time. If you just hold your breath, let's say we'll hold your breath for the rest of class. And no, you laugh because you know you have to in, out. You can't attach. You can't hold your breath. Your respirations require you to give and take, give and take, give and take. It's in motion. Your heartbeat, you feel it, boom, 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 boom. It's in motion. If you could listen, and they do this, they have these devices now that they can go inside the body. They call this, you know what I mean? These little tiny telescopic probes. And you can hear the inside your body, and you can see inside your body, and you're going, oh my God, this is like total chaos. It's just like the sea. It's just moving all the time. There's all kinds of noise going on. If you could hear that noise, you wouldn't be able to sleep at night. If you can hear the inside of your body, and you realize there's nothing still or quiet in my body. Even when you're, quote, at rest, it's just a cacophony of stuff going on. So that's us. We are a universe in motion. Moreover, where's the me in this? Because you got constant bacteria, microbes, and da-da-da-da-da throughout your system. Some of them are really scary. If you take an electron microscope and just look at the surface of your skin, it beats any science fiction movie you'll ever see. Really. And you're saying, well, that's who I am. And you go in more and more, and you just see there's all these cells and stuff that's moving around all the time. Okay, that's a micro. And up to the macro, wow, the universe is, what is it now, expanding or contracting? It's expanding. But it's expanding at a faster rate. So where's expanding to? I can't wrap my mind around that, It's like it's just expanding faster to where? To the end of the universe? Then what? It bounces back? So no matter where you look, we are in a flow, a constant flow. Now the Buddha was even more interested in saying, not are we but we're in a constant flow of our own experiences. Our own experiences are just a flow of events. And the only way we set anything up with them is that we imagine, we fabricate, we construct, we take all these materials and we take it and we make it into a really fixed, enduring me and mine. Let me introduce you to the major movie out there starring me and mine. Okay? And we have pictures, we have memories, we have reflections, we have narratives, we have plans. We all have plans, which is the me and my plan. And it's just saying, and I will direct this flow. That's the hubris. That I'm going to direct this flow, that I'm going to take control. And you say, well, wait a minute. I just got a diagnosis of terminal cancer that was not in my plan. So I object to this, and I'm going to protest this. I'm going to get this out and change it. And you feel like, wait, I can't. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I planned. Or I fell in love, and now she or he has found somebody else. Wait a minute, not part of my plan. And so no matter what you do, your health, your job, your career, your very longevity, your children, your grandchildren, all these things, your vacations, everything you set up and put and try to get it into a fixed, enduring reality is nothing more than the flow of events again and again and again. But the Buddha said, there's only this flow of experiences without any self-existing nature to any of this. And yet, and that's what he meant by empty, empty of any self-existing pattern, it's just the flow. And yet, we continue to believe in, construct, imagine, and hold this tight. So, this is the deep underlying view. Now, what's being posed here is that flow is constant. How you relate to it and how you understand it makes the difference between samsara and nirvana. The flow is absolutely the same. It doesn't change. If it's rightly understood, you don't attach to it, you don't cling to it, you're moving within conditions, not attached to conditions, just as he described so many times. In the midst of appearances, unmoved by appearances. In the world, but not of the world. So and so and so forth. Moving free and easy. Unattached, clinging to nothing. Everywhere engaged, nowhere grasping, so on and so forth. That's nirvana. It's the same flow, but you're not attached and grasping. It's rightly understood. Wrongly understood, constructed and clung to, it's samsara. So this is the non-dual part. It's very interesting. It's not like nirvana is where the universe is expanding to. So if you just wait long enough, you'll get there. Or it's another world that you will move into after you leave this one. You say, bye-bye, I'm checking out. I got my lotus and my beads, and I'm off to the Pure Land. Rather, what the text is saying, that the Pure Land and the Saha world, samsara and nirvana, are one and the same place, time, reality, but understood properly, it's nirvana. Misunderstood and cling to, it's samsara. This becomes really important to get at. You get what I'm saying? So if you understand, then the only shift that would happen would be the clarification of consciousness. Would be wisdom, seeing things as they really are, and being in that state all the time. Not clinging, not grasping, not rejecting. This is what is presented as awakening. So what does meditation have to do with any of this? So meditation is basically the destabilizing, or the dismantling, or the deflating, you want to use all the D's, and D, of this illusion that we live in, this constructed, imagined narrative. So if you say it's a big balloon and you puff it up, my balloon, right, and all of a sudden out pops all these sort of stories, and then meditation takes all the air out of it, brings it back. You could say it dismantles, in the sense you set it up like a bunch of Legos or the house of cards, and you got the last card, and then meditation goes and knocks the cards over. It destabilizes because the only stability is the stability of letting go and being unattached. Any other thing that you think is stable is actually destable, unstable. That's why the text says, when I take refuge with dharmas that go beyond relative dharmas. I leave the things of the world and I take refuge with a different place, because all the things that are conditioned as we see them don't provide stability. This is very interesting because everybody wants stability and security, but can you get it? How do you get it? It's like the human struggle is based on the quest for something we can never attain in the way that we're going about it. Because everything you grasp at slips away. Buddha says all things that come together fall apart, including the grabber. And I'm not talking about a handle, I'm talking about the hand. Okay, so what meditation does, and this is where the Buddha is very clear, he says, don't substitute meditation for another constructed reality. Don't think, oh, I'm going to get stability, I'm going to get my narrative, I'm going to get my little pure land when I cross my legs and sit in meditation. This is the danger. You mistake the meditation with it has its own states and images and experiences. You think this is real. And this is the injunction. So people are meditating, they're thinking, how do I know? Oh, I just felt lighter. Or my breath stopped. Or I saw something, or I heard something, or a sweet dew trickled on the top of my head. You know? All of these things in very profound states. I saw past lives, I knew others' thoughts, and so forth. The Buddha is saying, do not take these states and images and experiences as real. They're not. They're just another constructed temporary thing you're doing. So when you do the meditation topic, you're not saying, I'm constructing another reality that's the real reality called meditation, nirvana bliss. But what you're doing actually is you're deconstructing the flow. Meditation doesn't reveal things as they really are, but simply as you're making them out to be, it reveals. Let me say that again. It doesn't reveal things as they really are, but simply reveals you as you're making them out to be in some way. It only lets you see the mind's workings, busily trying to make something out of nothing, or attempting to construct a me and mine out of dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows. This is very important. So what meditation is doing, if you're doing it properly, is just stopping that crazy flow, destabilizing it. So you don't seek anything, you're not getting anything. It simply interrupts and stops the masquerade. And that very stopping, interestingly, the texts say, is in fact awakening. This is what's strange about it. The very stopping of that narrative, imagining, fabricating, constructing thing that we're not even aware of unless we sort of sit. The Buddha said you don't have to sit if you could just see it as it really is. But because we're so habituated, we have to do this funny exercise where we pull back the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and awareness, and we bring it back to the point where we can just catch the flow as it starts to generate. You can hear the wheel turning, and then you can sort of slow the wheel down, maybe not stop it, but you slow it down, and you can actually catch it turning. You know what a stroboscope is, right? Stroboscope? God, I'm going back Middle Ages. Well, when I was in physics, you had this, you have a handheld device, and you hold it and you make it go around. It's got spaces in it. So every couple inches there's a space opening. And if you look at a wheel, and the wheel's going round and round with spokes, and you can't see the wheel going round and round, it's a blur. But if you get the stroboscope and you spin it at the right speed, it freezes the wheel. It's really a cool thing. So, you know what I'm saying? So the spaces, this is very interesting about perception. The spaces, you have like a plate, and it has spaces in that you can see through. And when you spin it at the right speed and look at a tire turning, the tire stops moving because of the spaces in between freeze the tire. So meditation, in a sense, is like using this stroboscope to catch your wheels turning and give you a chance to see them close up, that they're just on a wagon going round and round and carrying you off in some fantasy. I hope this helps a little, because I'm afraid I left you last week with this idea you don't have to meditate. Meditation's not for nothing, it's for ungetting. But if you understand the theory of this, first of all, you won't go be seeking for special meditation or special teachers or special blessings or mantras or empowerments and all that stuff. Because all that special seeking is part of the masquerade narrative. Okay? It's like, wow, I came to the Buddhist monastery and he just says, let the mind be unattached, clinging to nothing. I tried that for a whole night and I didn't get awakened. So I think I'll go someplace else where if I do this and breathe in this way, I will see Guanyin first up close. And then Guan Yin will give me a prediction and say, above all, everybody here, you're the most special, and you're going to quickly get enlightened. Wrong. Be careful, okay? When you understand this, you understand all meditation is meant to do is to stop the mad mind, to hold the mad mind, to let you see the mad mind as it does its work. That's why there's a wonderful, let me quote you so you think I'm not making all this up. This is from the Avatamsaka. Such a person who doesn't understand its grasp at appearances, chapter 14, and extends the net of ignorance and delusion. Trapped and bound in the jail of birth and death, blind and unclear, he or she cannot see the Buddha. Contemplate all phenomena as being devoid of an essential nature, empty. The same is true of their arising and sensation, false names merely used to describe them. All dharmas do not come into being, all dharmas do not exist, cease to exist. If one understands in this way, then one is having the Buddha right before your eyes. Dharmas are basically empty and still in nature. They cannot be grasped or seen. The emptiness of the nature is just Buddha. When the mad mind stops, that stopping is Buddha. It cannot be thought about or considered, calculated, imagined, fabricated, planned, plotted, or set out in a lifetime, of goals and ambitions. Okay? That's from that chapter. Here's one of my favorites. This compares the mind, this mind that I say is the fabricated imaginer, that gets really, really busy when it's confused. It's like a painter. This is the one. It's like a painter spreading the various colors. Delusion grasps different forms, but the elements have no distinction. In the elements, there's no form, and no form in the elements, yet apart from the elements, no form can be found. In the mind is no painting. In painting, there is no mind, and yet apart from the mind, any painting can't be found. The mind never stops. The mind never stops. Very, very busy. One of the meditation practices we did with my teacher when I first came, I said, what should I do? And he said, oh, you could recite who. And I said, who? That's like an owl. He says, recite, who is this so busy? You contemplate that. So you're sitting there in meditation, right? You're going, okay, we got an hour sit. And going, you're like, who is this so busy? Yeah, I'm busy. There's nothing to do. I came here for a week to do nothing. But boy, am I busy. Busy, busy, busy inside. And they'd say, who is this so busy? Think about this. The mind never stops, manifesting all forms, countless, inconceivable many, unknown to each other. So you create these fabrications and they don't even know each other. Just as a painter can't know his own mind, yet paints due to the mind, so is the nature of all things. Mind is like an artist. This is really good. Able to paint all the worlds. The five aggregates are born from this. There's nothing it doesn't make. Isn't that, wow. If people really want to know all Buddhas of all time, they should contemplate the nature of the world, the cosmos. It's all a mental fabrication. End of that passage from the Avatamsaka. So just so you know, I didn't make this up, the metaphors I'm using. But what it's talking about is, this is very interesting. Don't think that the end result of this then is depression and emptiness and despair, but rather it's liberation. And that's what the texts are all saying. If you try to grab it and get at it, you can't. When you let go, how inconceivably wonderful it manifests in its true joy, bliss, fullness, and whatnot. But it's only in the letting go that that happens. Okay? Yes?
Part of the Avatamsaka Sutra.
Say what?
Where is that located in the Avatamsaka Sutra?
Oh, I knew somebody would do that tonight, and I'll have to dig it out. This is something, might be the Worthy Leader. The verses in the Worthy Leader chapter. The first one I gave you was from chapter 14. The second one, I think, are verses in the Worthy Leader chapter. But let me check it out. Okay? Okay, enough on that. Now, John Muir. Okay, so what I want to do with this is, remember last week, so you think I'm not using the text. I'm using the text. We had the vehicles. Remember Pratyeka? Yes?
Just not to go back too far out on what you were talking about. I know you want to move on, but just in terms of how the mind's a master fabricator, And then, so if we, like, for example, if we're talking to someone and there's some kind of event exterior of the mind, and that seems to be also creating a world in and of itself, how am I creating an illusion? And I mean, I'm very well aware often that, the mind goes into a spin and it creates worlds in and of itself, but it just seems like even independent of those worlds, there are other worlds out there that influence the way I think, and so it's just like, okay, so what part did my mind play in this, in the creation of that further illusion?
So here's where it gets very tricky and subtle, and one of the, how should I say it? One of the results of meditation, gradually over time, is to see that dichotomy is actually false, the out there and the in here. That you say there's events out there and then there's in here. But what the text is describing is a constant shifting, interacting reality. An event is only an event because you notice it. There's many events going on right now in this room with all kinds of things. You step into the night, there's hundreds of thousands of events going on, from the cosmos down to the ground under your feet with all its life forms. They are only events because we pay attention to them in a certain way and make them events, and then other things we don't notice. And so it's partly, event becomes event by our attending to it and interpreting it. And so because we're constantly in this interaction, it's not to say there's nothing happening. This flow is constantly going on, but the interpretation of that flow to make it an event. There's sports events going on tonight. Okay, for me, who cares? It's like they're not going on. But somebody is like sitting there thinking, what's the score? I gotta get. And so, no, right now, it's like, he's talking, but he doesn't notice. And I'm going, oh, wow, they're up by 10. Woo. So we're in the midst of 1,000 million events going on. We create one. We create a world. And that's our event world. And then it shifts over time. Something else happens. We shift a desire. We have an experience of trauma. And our consciousness shifts. And another event world opens up. And we're constantly moving through worlds of events strung together by this interaction of our consciousness, our attachments, our aversions and fears and so forth. And what the Buddha is saying is just these are all floating conditioned dharmas and then we forget about them when we move on to something else. And at the end, what do we have? As consciousness fades, as the body fades, and you're lying there with your last breath, the narrative's over. It all evaporates. That's why I was going to quote, but no, I'll do it tonight because I really like this section. This isn't the Buddha, this is Shakespeare. But this is a good part of Shakespeare. This occurs in, what's the one on the island? Tempest. And this is Shakespeare commenting. This is Prospero, who's the sort of magician. And he basically, on this island, through his magic, creates this whole world, this narrative. The two fall in love, there's this whole thing going on. And then, show's over. It's just as if here we are tonight, or you go home, or you're in your midst of your wedding, and you're making your vows. I love her, she loves me, I vow. And then somebody comes, all right, cut, that's enough, it's over with. The costumes go back, give her that wedding gown, take the church out, it's all over. It's just a play. No, I'm sorry, you didn't realize it was a play? Oh, okay, well, it was. Or you go, you're down here tonight, and suddenly the lights come on. It's like, remember when you go to a theater, watch a movie, and you're, oh my God, really in that movie? You're, oh my, it's sort of real. And then the movie's over, and you're going to go out, and you go outside and say, whoa, what happened? The light and the sunlight. But even worse, right in the middle of the movie, it used to be when I was a kid, the film would break. Here you are, all in the movie, and here comes the cover, and then the lights come on, and it's just these dumb kids next to you with popcorn, and there's nothing going on. And you were completely immersed in that movie, and then you realize it was just a play. And the Buddha's saying, by the way, our whole life is that. Okay, so here's Prospero. He says, now this whole thing comes in. Our revels now are ended. These are actors. As I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, The cloud-capped towers and gorgeous palaces, this was all the scenery he created, the solemn temples, and the great globe itself. Yeah, all of which it inherit shall dissolve. It sounds very Buddhist, but he's just Shakespeare. And like this insubstantial pageant faded. That's how the Buddha sees our life. An insubstantial pageant fading. We don't. We don't. It's like, man, we got these, what do you call these, trailers? Before we go to bed at night, we have little trailers for tomorrow's movie that's going to happen, in which I, ta-da, can't wait. And he says, like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. Everything's just dismantled. Okay? And then these famous last lines. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. Dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, rounded in a sleep. Now, rounded could either mean we're surrounded by sleep as we're living, because we're living in imaginary, fabricated realities. We don't like to admit this, but it's really true. Or it could mean completed by sleep, meaning the big sleep. However you. But it means that basically when we die, we awake from the dream into true reality, or at least a truer dream. But it's all over. So really, if you think about this, you start to break down that dichotomy. You actually start to see that of the myriad flow of things going on, we're constantly just selecting out a few. It's called selective perception. And then we disregard the rest, and we don't see them. Even on the news at night, you are given glimpses to realities that are just so different than the one we live in. And you're brought face to face with, say, migrants with their families being turned out at the border, to swim a river. And then you say, you deserve the best. Get your new Lexus, and da-da-da. And you go, right away, that's the ad. And then you go back, and that one's gone. And they say, that was evening news. Now what's happening with you, Martha? And it's like, these realities are just flashing by, and they're going on. And some of them are real to us, and some of them are like dreams. And the ones that are real now later become dreams, and the ones that are dreams later can become very real. It's really strange how this all works. But you have to realize that this is a mechanism of creation and pulling apart, of resetting, casting, and whatnot, but we're busy like the painter, painting all these things. So the question the Buddha is asking, when we stop this mechanism of creating and so forth, what is that then, when all this comes to a stop? And that's, as the definition is, the actual liberation from the false fabricating mechanism. So it's very complicated and yet very understandable, because if we realize throughout our whole life we've gone from narrative to narrative to narrative to narrative to narrative, and we're on one now, and the one we're in now we think is the true narrative. In a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, that we'll look back on and say, oh, that was just a dream. Now I'm in the real narrative. So this is like a contemplation. Oh, now it's 9. Should we start the Pratyeka Buddhas or do them next week? Okay, I think in fairness to you, and since next week is the last class, and I apologize, but maybe I'll go into this a little bit, because what I want to emphasize with this is we hear about these Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas, and we think of them as almost different races of beings, as different clans or something. But rather, what I want to suggest tonight is that these are states of consciousness that we all have to some degree in various stages, and they can simultaneously be working. Moreover, the passage I want to read to you, this longer passage of John Muir, where he was actually doing a Pratyeka-like exercise, is because, I'll read you this section. This is a trailer coming next week to a monastery near you. Is the story of the Pratyeka Buddhas. Okay, so here's the verse. This is from Master Hua's 10 Dharma Realms Not Beyond a Single Thought. Really, really interesting, good book. But it says, the realm of those enlightened to conditions, which are Pratyeka Buddhas. And here's the verse. The holy sages enlightened to conditions doze high on mountain peaks alone. Springtime's flowers wither in the fall, in a cycle of 12 interconnecting links. So this describes them, and then if I could show you, there's a lot, I love this drawing. I don't know who did this drawing. Those are the Pratyeka Buddhas. They're dozing on the mountain peaks alone. So this is a category of human beings. This is a category of a living being. In other words, it is a potential in us to become, to grow into. And the motivation to do this is a kind of awareness of the passing of things, that you see in the fall, you see the leaves turn and fade. Or I picked a flower on my walk yesterday, I came back and was just sitting there on my counter, wilted. And, you know, we observe these things. We see the passing of children into adolescence, into adults, into old age, and passing. And we're aware of this. And this phenomena of the passing of things leads to a sort of spiritual thoughtfulness. And this is the beginning of the Pratyeka Buddha. They're called solitary enlightened ones because they come to this awakening on their own. They don't, it's not because they read a text or they had a teacher, but they simply observe. They're just aware. I mean, you go for a walk in the woods, you can't help but observing. Some things are coming into being, some are fading away, some are gone and molded, and some are not yet. And just, you know, you go through the seasons, you can still say. So if you're aware of this, they deeply contemplate it. They go into what's called the 12 conditioned links, which is the deep mechanism of what takes us through life to life to life. There's 12 of these. But that's the deepest. But at the beginning levels, they simply pull away from society and all its busyness. And they like to have no television, no newspapers and whatnot. They go into nature, sometimes into the valleys, sometimes into the mountaintops. Here they say mountains. And they live simple lives, like Hanshan Coal Mountain. And sometimes they write poetry. And so they use this to contemplate and get a sense of both a real reality and also a kind of joy and liberation that comes from being in the middle of something that's deeper and truer than sort of just the passing. Now it's said that by definition, they don't join communities, so they're not really Sanghas. They don't join a Sangha community. They don't become monks or nuns, you know, formally. Nor do they stay in the householder's life in the world. They don't marry and have kids. So they're in this interesting state in between. And I would suggest that many of us probably psychologically kind of dwell in that space. We may be householders, but yeah, we're not totally convinced this is the be-all and end-all. And we're not exactly monastics in the community, but we kind of go back and forth. There's a kind of inclination we have towards both. Sometimes we like to feel we're kind of monastic and whatnot, and then we pull back. But, you know, we want to get involved with a big sort of family thing, we kind of pull back. And there's a sort of balancing thing that we do that's the Pratyeka Buddha mind. And we spend time in nature. If we want things, we go and walk the seashore. You know, we just sit at the seashore and watch the waves, or we go to the mountains, or we get out in nature and just sort of kind of observe and feel something happening. That's how we restore ourselves. This is Pratyeka Buddha energy. And so the passage I'm going to read to you next week is a very interesting one, because I think if we see it in this way as not formal Buddhist categories, but psychological predispositions or orientations or spiritual ones, it's more easy to relate to. And this one is John Muir, that I'm going to read to you, where he does a Pratyeka-like experience in the Sierras during this incredible storm. And what's interesting about it is not just how he does it, but how he describes it. And what's even more interesting, his conclusion. Because he basically concludes with something you might say is a Pratyeka Buddha awakening. And it's a very interesting passage. So that's what I was going to share tonight, but we never got to it because I spent so much time on this stuff. About why you need not to meditate, but do anyhow. So next week, maybe I'll do that and close with that. And that actually prepares me for my going to Maine in the summer. So as soon as I finish everything, then I head off to a place in Maine, which is sort of like Pratyeka Buddha land. My sister's there, but on the margins, so it's okay. But there's no television or radio. There's very, very poor reception. There's one place in the lake you can get a cell phone reception that's on or off. And so I seldom go to that part of the lake. And the water is still so pure we can drink it right out of the lake. And
The dog.
and the dog becomes my companion for the summer. So the dog and I go off every day, and there's no conversation between us. I don't read books to the dog, and just sort of hang out in nature, and it restores. It's not for everybody, and it's really finding over the years that a lot of people don't like being there. It makes them nervous. But anyhow, then I come back. I always come back. Sometimes I come back more slowly than others. I'm expecting this summer will be another one, but this is probably a good intro too. And I must say, I haven't tried this, but I might try it this summer to climb a tree like he did and outlast, because those storms up there, I mean, you have not heard thunder and seen lightning until you've been in one of those storms. You know, I'm telling you, it feels like it's going right through your veins. Your bed shakes with the thunder. And at that point, the dog jumps up on the bed and dives under my pillow. I normally don't let the dog sleep with me, but I'm just shaking with this sound of the lightning and thunder. But it really drops the pretense that human beings are in control of this world and the universe, that we are the masters of anything at all. You feel smaller than what we call a no-see-um up there, which is a bug so small it can go through the screens. And humans, when you're in that, especially if you're out on the water when one of these storms come up, you really feel absolutely at the mercy of the elements, and start to realize that all our buildings and cities and whatnot are, how did Prospero put it? That's a good, yeah. New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, melted into air, into thin air, baseless fabric of a vision, cloud-capped towers, gorgeous palaces, solemn temples, Bank of America, the great globe itself, all shall dissolve, and pageant will fade away. Okay, anyhow, enough for tonight, I guess. No announcements? Nobody's here to make announcements. That could mean something really interesting happening. I know tomorrow
Morning.
is the bathing of the Buddha ceremony here, right?
The Buddha's birthday.
Tomorrow's the celebration of the Buddha's birthday, so there'll be a ceremony here, of exercise of bathing the Buddha, that you're all welcome to come and do. If you've never done it before, it's worth doing at least one time. It's really a lovely ceremony. Any other things to announce?
Tomorrow night, the lecture is still going on, Saturday lecture. But
And this sutra that I quoted you, the Avatamsaka Sutra, is the
tomorrow
content.
will be the Avatamsaka Sutra lecture.
Yeah.
So that will be the
Oh.
non-infinite sutra lecture.
Oh, so Avatamsaka is not tomorrow night, there's a different lecture?
Because Dhamma Master sure will have a workshop in singing, so he won't be able to.
Oh, okay, okay. If you want to, I would recommend going into the Avatamsaka. There's a couple translations out. We have one translation, and Thomas Cleary has another translation, and they're a little bit different, but if you can read the Chinese, actually the Chinese is very accessible, it's not hard. It's a wonderful text, it's long, and you will enter the Avatamsaka Samadhi, and you won't realize that time has passed and you've woken up from a dream that you were in, because you're in another state here. It's an incredible text. It's called the King of Sutras. It has all the major schools of Buddhism, and all the major concepts and principles are found in that text. The Four Truths, the Eightfold Path, up to the complete description of the Bodhisattva path, and what the awakening of a Buddha is like. The last chapter, the 10 Grounds, describes the awakened state of Buddhas, and it's absolutely stunning, and much of it in verse and poetry form. It's really beautiful. So that text I would just recommend. And in times when things are gloomy and dark and things are not going right and officials in high office are acting in low, this is a great text to bring out because it will lift your spirits immensely. Not as an escape, but as a reminder of what the full possibility of the human is, even though it's not manifest completely in our time. So that's one text I would recommend. For next week, if you want to, there's a sutra called the Rhinoceros Horn. And that's describing the Pratyeka Buddha. So they said the Prateka Buddha is like a rhino wandering in solitary through the woods. It's a famous sutta called the Radhasa's Horn Sutta. So maybe I'll find a section from that for next week too and look at that for the Prateka Buddha. Okay? All right, we will do the transference in English and call it a night.